Hello everyone, this is recording number 7 for Early Stoic Philosophy, a class on Stoic logic, physics and ethics. And today I want to talk about the Stoic approach to vagueness, or in the terms of the Stoics, the Sorites paradox. The word Sorites derives from the Greek word for heap, and the heap is also the paradigmatic example for the Stoics when they illustrate the phenomenon that interests them. So here's how the presentation that the Stoics offer goes. You imagine a kind of dialectical scenario, which is already quite different from how today we think about vagueness, but is an important dimension of the Stoic approach. You imagine that there is a questioner and a respondent. And the questioner takes a grain of sand, a grain of corn, puts it somewhere and says, "Is this a heap?" The respondent says no. The questioner takes another grain of sand, adds it, asks, "Is this a heap?" No. And so on and so forth, always adding one grain of sand or corn or whatever. And then the scenario is taken to be a paradox insofar as the respondent, according to the Stoics, has only absurd options. Now, one of these absurd options is, in the words of Galen, who reports the Stoic view in the text that we are reading for this week, that you end up, as it were, making the existence or non-existence of a heap depend on just one grain of sand. Because in that scenario, you would, as it were, say no, 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 no to the question, "Is this a heap?" And then, with just one grain of sand added, switch to saying yes. So it would be one grain of sand that decides the being or not being of a heap, and that is absurd. The other option that the respondent has is to just go on and on and on, saying no. But then she finds herself with the absurd claim that, let's say, 10,000 grains are not a heap. So both of her options seem absurd, and that is how the Stoics describe the phenomenon that interests them. Now, this phenomenon is not precisely what today is called vagueness, but scholars tend to think it is close enough to make it plausible to discuss the Stoic take on these kinds of cases, which they call Sorites series, as kind of their approach to what today we call vagueness. Now, another example that the Stoics use quite a bit is only concerned with numbers and the concepts few and many. Here the questioner asks, "Is 2 few?" And the respondent says yes. "Is 3 few?" The respondent says yes. And so on and so forth, always moving to the next number. And again, it seems that the respondent has only absurd options. Either she is going to switch from yes to no with just sort of one added to the number, or she's going to end up saying that, let's say, 1,000 or 10,000 are few. Now, it is very clear that Chrysippus, the leading logician of the Stoics, was intensely interested in these kinds of problems. We know from reports that he wrote a number of treatises about these puzzles, but at the same time, we don't really know a lot about the kind of ramifications of the Stoic approach, and we do not currently have, I think, compelling reconstructions of what is really going on here. Timothy Williamson, who holds a view on what is today called vagueness, namely epistemicism, has suggested that the Stoics are ancestors of epistemicism. And that would be the view, in brief, that there is a sharp cutoff where, let's say, up to there, something is not a heap, and then it is. But we are epistemically not in a position to know that cutoff. So there is a sharp limit, but we are epistemically not able to detect it. And the idea that maybe this is what the Stoics are saying generated a bit of discussion. And Susanne Bobzien has, I think, persuasively rejected the idea that this is the type of position the Stoics are holding. But in terms of a kind of positive, comprehensive characterization of what the Stoics are doing, I think there's still work to do. And I want to sketch now the Stoic approach and raise a few questions about it as if we're working towards an understanding of what is going on. So what the Stoics seem to be doing is not actually offer really an account of vagueness, but a strategy by which one avoids that one assents to non-cataleptic impressions. Namely, they tell us that the wise person assents as long as she has cataleptic impressions. So for example, let's say the impression 2 is few is cataleptic. We already discussed cataleptic impressions. Those are impressions which capture precisely how something is and also reveal to the cognizer that they capture precisely how something is. So as long as the wise person has impressions such as 2 is few, which are cataleptic, she assents. And then the Stoic proposal is that there is going to be a sharp cutoff between cataleptic and non-cataleptic impressions. There is going to be a last cataleptic impression, and then the next one is non-cataleptic. But the wise person does not aim to, as it were, hit that last cataleptic impression. Rather, she falls silent or shuts up, as the sources put this, a bit before that. And Cicero compares that to a person who is driving toward the edge of a cliff. And if she is a cautious driver, she's not going to try to come to a halt right at the edge. Rather, she's going to come to a halt a bit before that. And that is the kind of normative proposal that the Stoics make with respect to these Sorites series of questions, that the wise person, or, the person that we should all be, falls silent a bit before she no longer has a cataleptic impression. Now, here are a few remarks about that strategy, just as it were inviting you to think about it and how it compares to today's positions on vagueness. The first important thing is it is a strategy. It is not really an account or a theory of what is going on. It is a strategy for how you, the cognizer, should deal with it. Second, by being a strategy, it is normative. It is telling us what we should be doing. Again, that is not a feature of today's approaches to vagueness. And third, it is concerned with the distinction between cataleptic and non-cataleptic impressions, as, the Stoics always are. So that is not a concern that figures in today's discussions of vagueness. And finally, it is not directly concerned with truth. That is maybe the richest and most complex consideration here. When we ask ourselves, the Stoics say that there is a sharp cutoff with respect to whether an impression is cataleptic. There is a final cataleptic impression, and then the next one is non-cataleptic. But they are not saying that there is a sharp cutoff with respect to true and false impressions. And that should remind us of when we studied the Stoic classifications of impressions, we saw that the Stoics think there are true impressions, false impressions, impressions that are both true and false, and impressions that are neither true nor false. So that, I want to suggest, opens up really interesting options for a Stoic account of vagueness, if they were to give one. in addition to their strategy, because it is quite conceivable that, let's say, an impression such as 50 is few is neither true nor false. And if that is the Stoic idea, and that is also a suggestion that Susanne Bobzien makes, then they would hold a view that is significantly different from any of the standard positions today.